What's the meaning behind Adam and Eve making clothes out of fig leaves after they sinned? First, we need to remember that God eventually clothed Adam and Eve with garments of skin, replacing the fig leaf coverings they had made. In a sense, this symbolizes that Adam and Eve, who were created as living souls, had now returned to the flesh. But at the same time, it also reveals God's grace. Now, let's take a moment to reflect on the meaning behind Adam and Eve making clothes out of fig leaves. In short, Adam and Eve making coverings from fig leaves represents the culture pioneered by people, while God clothing them with garments of skin points to his divine grace. After the fall, the people who were once spirit-centered were transformed into flesh-centered beings by God. Originally, before the fall, everyone lived naked. Just like animals today can go through winter without clothes, Adam and Eve didn't care about clothing. They simply lived naked. And even though they were naked, they weren't ashamed and lived just fine. But after that, they gave in to the devil's temptation and fell. And suddenly their eyes were opened. The devil had tempted them by saying their eyes would be open if they ate the fruit from the knowledge of good and evil. The moment they accepted the devil's temptation, their eyes were opened. And that's when they first began to gain insight into culture. This is how they began to gain insight into culture. The Bible says, then the eyes of both of them were open and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Genesis 3:7. You can also see their sense of cultural awareness in Genesis 3:8, where it says they hid among the trees of the garden when the cool of the day came. That means they were sensitive enough to feel the temperature. In a way, temperature control can be seen as a measure of society's level of cultural development. For example, in the US, whether you're in an office, a plane, or a car, the temperature is pretty consistent. You hardly notice a change. But when you visit most of other countries, you can tell they're still behind when it comes to that. So, even back then, Adam and Eve were already beginning to grasp a culture that could manage temperature. When the devil deceived the humans, the thing they became most sensitive was culture. The devil began to control people through culture, Matthew 4:8-10. And as people became more and more sensitive to culture, they gradually grew more distant from God. In the Bible, we see many instances where God intentionally interrupted culture and civilization at their peak. After Noah's flood, people built the Tower of Babel, confidently saying that even if another flood came, it wouldn't be able to destroy their tower. That's how advanced their civilization had become. But at that point, God confused their language and brought their culture and civilization progress at a halt. Among the elements of Babylonian culture, Chaldean scholarship was the most advanced of its time. Babylon was a nation intellectually armed with this Chaldean knowledge. They were equipped with what was considered the highest form of scholarship in the ancient world, and their civilization was highly developed. But didn't God put a stop to that as well? Even for us believers, if we try to pursue an overly cultural lifestyle, we end up abandoning our faith. The more we chase after cultural activities, the more we tend to neglect our life of faith.